Welcome to this episode of OLR Connections, the podcast of the Ohio Lodge of Research. In this discussion, we're going to learn a little bit more about Right Wishful Brother Rob Brower. Right Wishful Brother is a very active Mason in many of the appendant bodies, as well as the Blue Lodge, and an active member of the Ohio Lodge of Research. Well, Right Wishful, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. And as brief a brief a window as you would like to or can try, give me your Masonic history, kind of how you got into this and how you got to where you are. And I know that's a long story, but as briefly as you want to tell it.
Sure. So I'm one of those infamous one-day class guys. I came in, I believe, in the second one-day class in 2003 or 2004. My father joined Trotwood Lodge rather late in life. He was in his mid-40s, but my grandfather was a Mason in Kentucky and Indiana. His father was a Mason in Indiana. And I always wanted to do it, but at the time, school was a big priority. I had just gotten married. I just didn't feel like I had the time. And eventually, that petition ended up in my hand. They said, "Hey, there's going to be this one-day class. That'd be a great time to go and experience that." So I did that, and the current worshipful master of Solar Lodge, Doug Pelfrey, was my mentor that day. Sat there with me all day. His father was my second line signer, Right Worshipful Brother Nate Pelfrey. So came in that way, and then for a couple of years, I didn't do anything with Lodge. I don't think I came back. I just paid my dues. For whatever reason, we had moved. Katie and I had moved back to the Inglewood area, and I said, "Hey, I'm kind of bored." Talked to my dad, said, "Let's go to Lodge." So we did. And then kind of everything else fell in place from there. We went to a couple of events here and in Indiana because my dad was a plural member at the hometown lodge, which is Hagerstown Lodge in Hagerstown, Indiana. And in the drives over there with Nate Pelfrey, got talking about the ritual and got to hear the ritual, and it really excited me. I liked the thought that we're doing the same things, or we're doing the things the same way that they've been done year after year after year. And for whatever reason, that clicked with my brain, and that drew me in. And so my father and I ended up getting into line at Solar Lodge through a series of small events and life getting in the way. I ended up jumping ahead of him in line, and then became worshipful master in, I believe, 2013, and then did it again in 2017. After that, I joined the Scottish Rite about 15 or 16, 17 years ago, maybe now. And then a few years after that, I decided to join all the York Rite bodies. So got my feet wet in that, and actually being the high priest of Mount Moriah chapter was my first presiding office in a Masonic body. It was a great experience. I met so many new guys that do just amazing things for Masonry through everything I've done in the York Rite. And that's the one thing I need to check off my Masonic bucket list is I have yet to go through the commandery officer line, and I really want to do that. My dad just got his KYCH like 2 years ago, and I want to join him in Ohio Priority. So once my schedule starts to open up a little bit, that's what I intend to do. But 10 years ago, I was asked by Most Worshipful Brother Wegledge, matter of fact, who was going to be elected as the Most Wise Master of Dayton Chapter Rose Croix. I was asked if I wanted to join the Scottish Rite officer line as an officer in the Rose Croix, and I took him up on that. And that was a somewhat surreal experience to sit next to him and get to talk to him on a very personal level, and just knowing where he was at in the Grand Lodge line and everything he had done and was going to do, just the amount of care and respect and kind of gathering me under his wing he did was just amazing. And with all the officers in that line, it's just kind of looking up at like all your peers and you're with these guys. You're like, am I in the right room? But I was so honored to be asked to serve the second district as a DEO, and got some great tutelage from a senior DEO who had to take 2 new guys under his wing and show them how to do things. And then did that for 2 years, and it was an absolutely amazing experience. My advice to anyone is, if the Grand Master ever approaches you to take on a leadership role such as a DEO, jump at it. It is an amazing opportunity, an amazing experience. And then a series of Grand Masters have saw fit to appoint me as a district deputy for the second Masonic district. And that's another thing. If I wasn't aging out, so to speak, with coming up to into my 3rd year, and if Right Worship Brother Carter said, "Hey, we need you to do a 4th year," I would jump at the chance. It's been such an amazing experience. Gotten to know so many brethren that I wouldn't have otherwise. Visited so many lodges. Hopefully helped lodges through problems that they were experiencing. And it's just been an absolutely fantastic experience. And I wish everybody had the opportunity to enjoy that.
How would you describe, or how would you get at the importance of leadership and the educational component of leadership that we have within the lodge? Because it's obviously important to you.
The brethren that want to step up and be officers, a lot of times we end up so laser focused on the ritual part of that we can begin to forget about the leadership. I mean, the lodge, in my opinion, should be very educational, and there should be a focus there. We should be trying to teach the brethren things, but without leadership, that lodge is just going to fall apart, and it's not going to be there to pass on the lessons that we want it to pass on. I would agree with Robert Johnson. I think has made a point to say that Freemasonry isn't the main point, isn't to teach leadership, and I agree with that. That's not the main point, but we also need to be helping equip some of these brethren who might be coming from backgrounds where that's not a part of their daily life, whether it was in school or their current occupation, where they need to be a leader. We should give them that safe space to acquire the skills, to try things out, and the safety to fail, and then say, okay, yep, that went a little sideways. Here's maybe how we could do it a little bit better in the future, and let them get it back on the horse and try it again. I think Masonry gives an excellent opportunity for these brethren to learn about themselves and learn about leadership, and to practice that leadership in a myriad different ways. And it doesn't have to be, something formal through an officer's position or anything like that. I mean, we need the sideline brethren to want to step up and get involved with planning an educational event, helping host that table lodge, reaching out to brethren, creating that calling committee and keeping on top of it and keeping it going forward, bringing ideas to the LEO about what they would like to hear about next, taking the bull by the horn, so to speak, and writing up that short little talk that he finds interesting, presenting it, and then getting feedback from the brethren and starting the conversation in the lodge. So we need all of that, and I think Freemasonry gives an excellent opportunity and venue for brethren to develop those skills if they want to do that.
No, I think you hit on an important one there, at least in my eyes, is that not everybody has to be an officer to be a leader of some form, and definitely to be a contributing part of the lodge.
Oh, 100%. And that's where I think a lot of brethren get a little blinders as well. They say, well, if I'm not an officer, the lodge doesn't need me. And really the lodge needs those brethren on the sideline that are willing to do everything else other than be an officer, because there's just so much more to the life of that lodge than keeping that progressive officer line progressing year after year after year. The brethren on the sidelines bring that vitality and the heartbeat to the lodge. The officers just help, throw out some big plans and kind of get them going in the right direction. But those sideline brethren, we need them there too. And another thing, and just to reiterate, you don't have to be a ritualist to be a valuable part of your lodge. You don't have to be given a part in a degree to be needed and to be integral. The brethren in my lodge that have no aspiration to be worshipful master is typically the brother that greets every single new candidate that's coming through. He's back there, he's talking them through it. He kind of becomes their first friend in the lodge, and that's huge. He establishes that initial connection with this new guy coming through, beyond just his first line signer, and helps bring him into our lodge family and introduce him to kind of the way that we do things. And here's this guy, this is what he likes, let's go talk to him about this or this and that. So those brethren are so incredibly valuable, and we just don't have a good metric on how to metric how valuable they are, and to write it down somewhere to say, this is the value you're bringing to our lodge. And don't forget that. And I think we need to be a little bit more mindful about that, and maybe get better as lodges on recognizing those brothers that are a little bit behind the scenes in terms of just not being officers.
How do you convince those guys that they need to step up? I mean, the ones that are doing it, great, and we need to recognize them. But what's the trick that we need to use to get everybody else involved?
I think it really all goes back to understanding the brethren and becoming their friends, that not just inside the lodge, but outside the lodge, form that bond with them. And then, once you know this brother, his strengths, his weaknesses, and you're not just only coming to him to ask him for things, then when you do need some help and you make that personal call to say, hey, we got this coming up, we got this hole that we need to fill, and I think you'd be perfect for it for this reason, that brother's much more likely to say yes. And I think just doing your daily work as a Mason in the quarries, so to speak, and establishing those friendships and building those bonds, that helps when it comes time to crunch time, and you need to fill a spot for something, and you can go make that personal ask rather than an impersonal email blast that is very easily sent to the spam folder, or you hit delete. When you've got the connection with the brother and you're doing it personally, that makes all the difference in the world. And that all starts with the fellowship after lodge, breaking a little bread with them. In our case, it's going to B&G Cigar Lounge after lodge, having a couple cigars, solving the world's problems, talking about anything and everything. It's going to a brother's child's first birthday party and just hanging around, saying hi, getting to know his wife a little bit. It's all the little things like that.
That's kind of the description of a good leader too, though, right? As someone who is willing to get down in the trenches and lead by example as opposed to command.
That is 100% true. In my job, I had my first boss. She was a brilliant scientist. She was very black and white. That was a nice thing. You didn't have to read between the lines with her. But she would ask you to do some pretty horrible things. I had to scrape pig intestines to isolate some enzymes for an assay. And they were relatively fresh. So they hadn't been cleaned out by the people that sent them to us. But she was standing right next to me, scraping out intestines with me. And I said, you know what? This sucks, but it sucks equally for her. She's willing to do it. We're going to do this together. And that's very important. Never ask people to do things you're not willing to do or you have done yourself. Be part of the solution, and never let whatever title or position you've gotten get to your head and think, you know what, no, I'm too good for that. No, if you're part of this fraternity, you should have your hands in whatever pie needs to be handled at that time.
There are a number of people in Masonry that I've made good connections. I've become good friends with that I don't think outside of Masonry our paths would have ever crossed.
One of my education talks that I'll give on the spur of a moment, if somebody needs one, is all about, you ask people about who are the famous Freemasons, and they'll give you the George Washington, King Gillette, the Henry Ford, yada yada yada, and they're starting to pick up where I'm going. But at first, they would say all that, and I would say, would you be surprised that there's somebody in this world whose famous Freemason is you, and all they know about Freemasonry is you? And that's a pretty heavy mantle to wear, but we all have to wear it. And you're a role model and in a walking advertisement for Freemasonry, whether you wanted to do it or not. You are. And I just met so many brethren who they just don't know the impact that they're making on not just me, but the brethren around them.
Are there others that you would attribute to that? Anybody else that you kind of recognize as helping you along your Masonic path that really wouldn't have fit into your normal circle?
So not to pick on the host here, but I don't think you and I would have met outside of Freemasonry, even though we work kind of in the same a very similar field. We're trained similarly. Not I don't have the depth that you do, but I don't think we would have met likely outside of Freemasonry, and that would have been an absolute shame in my life. Troy Davis, even though we live 3 minutes away from each other, outside of Freemasonry, I don't know if I would have ever met him, and he's been such a huge influence on how I view leadership and accountability and getting things done and just doing what you say you're going to do. And he was raised in my lodge, but he had become a plural member or admitted to Bolivar Lodge with his father before I started getting active. But you came back to Solar and you always heard these stories about this mythical Troy Davis that could do everything that we needed him done in degrees and whatnot. And you hear all this and you're kind of like, okay, yeah, I'm sure he's a great guy, but nobody can live up to that. And then I got to meet him and know him, and I'm like, it's nice when the stories match the reality. And I do like to say, when I grow up, I hope I can be like Troy Davis. So he hates hearing that. His wife thinks it's hilarious when I say that. So, yeah, and there's just too many others that they're not coming to mind right now. But there just been so many brothers, like you said, Chad. I would have never met Chad Kapinski or Dan Ranabarger outside of Freemasonry. And I talked to Robert Potts, another brother who I never would have met. He's a PhD physicist from the University of Tennessee. He works out at the base on some hush-hush stuff. And if you ever can find his thesis online, about the fourth page in, there's a Masonic quote on one of those things. It's a nice little tidbit that, I'm sure he expected no one to ever pick up on, other than the brethren that were bored at work one day looking up his thesis online. It brings so many different people from different walks of life that can come into a lodge room, have an instant connection. It's not going to be the deepest connection ever, but your brothers. And then from that, just a springboard to really develop that into a deeper friendship that become extremely lasting.
Yeah, you hit on something there, and for those who regularly listen to the OLR Connections, you occasionally see what we refer to as the Brower count, and it's kind of a misnomer because the Brower count is really a Brower observation of the Kapinski count, maybe is the right way to say it. Did you want to comment on that at all?
I was going to avoid using the word connections through this whole interview, just to make Chad upset. Well, he probably wouldn't get upset; he'd get a kick out of it. But yeah, so that's another thing. I would have never run across Chad Kopensky if I had not started to get involved in attend Grand Lodges, and especially being a DEO when he was chairman of the education committee. And just, he sees the world so much differently than me that it's fascinating. We're wired a lot alike in terms of references and humor and what we're hoping to get out of it in whatever we're doing. But ultimately, I think we see Freemasonry very similarly in that I think he hit it. He would say, you know, it's all about connections, meeting someone new, putting two things together, things of that nature.
As the Lodge of Research, we have been asking for the last 2 years at least, what is Masonic research? Like, what does that actually mean?
So I think the term Masonic research can kind of scare some people off because they think it is digging deep into, you know, some obscure text to make some sort of conclusion that no one's ever made. And probably, you know, from your experience in academia, you know, with that sort of research, you know, you're looking to make that one little new piece of information, but you're drawing on such a much wider breadth of information that you're hoping you're going to make a groundbreaking revelation, but it's probably not going to be. It's going to be new, but it's not going to change the world likely. I think a lot of people get scared off because of that. They think they're going to need to be in some first edition of Mackey's Encyclopedia and find a line that everybody had just skipped over and find a new meaning for that. And then where did he get that from? And then you're going to the next microfiche storage, if they still have things stored on microfiche at libraries, to find where Mackey got that from, and then, you know, really bring it back to the beginning. For me, Masonic education and research, it's much more internal for me. It's here's some symbol. Here's what we say it means. What does it mean to me? Why do I think it means that? How has it impacted me? How can we put it into better practice in our daily lives? So that's, for me, that's where I come from for education, at least. A lot of my things that I put together aren't necessarily aren't new, and I didn't go reading a million books. It's just me doing a little bit of a brain dump on a piece of paper about my thought process and why I think that this is important, and that I hope that everybody else thinks it's important.
I've forgotten your number off the top of my head, but you're a Royal Schofield Society Master of the Craft.
Number 15.
15? Okay, very good. And you mentioned Hot Squad earlier. So you're either working through that or you finished that.
Yeah, I just finished that here the beginning of the year.
Okay, congratulations on that. Excellent.
Yeah, that took some time to get done, mainly because I did all the research and then kind of sat on it for a while. Couldn't get myself motivated. And then finally I said, you know what, let's just work this outline and see what we can do. So went to B&G's cigar lounge by myself. I lit up a cigar. I had my iPad and I just started pounding keys. And for anybody that's doing that, or the Royal Schofield Society, they're worried about their masterpiece. Much like learning a lecture, the first line's the hardest. The rest comes after that. Don't let that be intimidating to you. And like I said, just write that first line of what you're proposing and go from there. And if you think that's a little intimidating, put together a rough outline of kind of what you want this to be or what you hope it could be, and then work that outline, you know, piece by piece by piece. Take your time with it, and then share it with brethren who you trust. I know you honored me when you sent me a little piece you were going to present, I believe, down in Louisville to read over. And that meant so much to me to be able to just to read that and to have your trust. So yeah, as you're writing, the brethren are all here to help you. Nobody wants to fill your paper up with red marks just to be a difficult grader. We're all here to make what everyone else is doing better. So hopefully everybody in the Lodge of Research, takes the time to put something together that's meaningful for them, and get it to your lodge, get it to the Lodge of Research. Just get it out wherever you can, because there's never going to be too much education in the fraternity.
Yeah. No, I agree completely with what, your sentiment there, that there are a lot of people that I think that are a little overwhelmed with the idea of participating in the Lodge of Research. And the way I have come to define it for myself, and hopefully it makes sense to other people, is that all research is answering questions. And then education is sharing those answers with other people.
And nothing says that it needs to be done in a silo either, right? There are the best academic papers are co-authored. You rarely see a single author paper. So get out there with your brethren, and if what you're interested in interests somebody else, work together. Don't feel like you have to do it all by yourself, because it definitely doesn't need to be done that way if you don't want to do it that way.
I'll just ask one last question, which is, I think you've probably kind of already answered this, but what bit of advice do you have, or what comment do you want to make to leave the brothers with?
Just be active in whatever way is most engaging for you, and don't mistake that for having to be an officer learning ritual or someone that's planning every event for your lodge. Just be active, be out there, get to know the brethren, have them get to know you, engage physically in your lodge, engage outside of your lodge, and soak it all up, because it's there's just so much positivity, information, wisdom, and character building that's just being radiated from these brethren that are around you. Just soak it all up, and take it serious, but show up and be active however you want to do that, because your presence is needed. Whether or not you think it is, it's needed.